Welcome to Chapter 5 of the Adquio web interface. In this chapter, we are going to see the export of variables to Modbus TCP. We switch to an Adquio. Here, we have as always an Adquio that is currently in operation. To get to the export of variables, we will simply go to the export menu option. All we have to do is indicate the Modbus node number, which obviously must be unique in the Modbus network, in which we are going to integrate this device. We will leave the byte order and address order values as they are. Almost on no occasion is it necessary to modify them, since these values that it proposes by default are the most common. These would be the general parameters. The last thing we are going to do is activate it, but at the moment we are not going to activate it, because it does not have variables to export. So, to decide which variables we want to export, we are going to click this button plus, and Adquio go to show us a list with all the variables that it is managing. In this case, there are 91. So we have two options. 1. To select them one by one in this way. Or 2. Mark them all by clicking on the check in the header. We see that in this list, we have the device, the name of the variable, the data type of that variable, and whether or not it can simply be written informative values, so that we can clearly know what variable it is. So, in this case, we are going to see that we have selected all the variables, even though they are not visible. This check marks them all, although, as you can see, they are not in sight. But if we go through it, if we see that we are seeing them all marked, it tells us what variable it is, and to differentiate, it has named them with the name of the device, a hash, and the name of the variable. The write supports column is very important, and we will explain why. Although we're talking all the time that this is a Modbus export, it really isn't. It really would be a Modbus post. Therefore, with this variable we can indicate if the external device, which is connected to us, can change values in our variables. The following must be taken into account, and is that, if the variable originally in the device in which we have read it does not support writing, no matter how much we tell you here that it does, it will not do anything, okay? On the other hand, if a variable supports writing, and here we say that it supports writing, from the outside, a device outside of us will be able to modify the value of that variable. The type of variable in Adquio, if it has a converter or not, the type of variable that it will use in the protocol. This is important, because, with this option, we can get a type of variable in Adquio, for the Modbus export, to behave like another variable that if we need it, okay. We have the value variable out of order, in which we could manually indicate that, if this variable cannot be read from the device, from which we are obtaining it, what value would we put here? Well, we could put a 0, we could put a value outside the usual range, that this variable usually reads, and so on. We could also make a value correction here, for export purposes. We have already seen it, in the case of the inputs of the PT1000 probes. Next, we have the type of memory in Modbus, in which it is located. We see that in this case, they are all holding and register. And then, we have the steering column, but we see that this column is not covered. This happens because Adquio first allows us to select which variables we want to export. It would allow us, on several occasions, to hit the plus and add variables that we had not previously exported to add them to this list, but it leaves us for a later process, the process of giving addresses to the variables. We are going to see how it is done. We click this button, Automatic Assignment of Modbus Addresses, because we are going to tell it that we want it to start from address 0. And, as you can see, it has just covered the address column, which was previously empty with some addresses automatically depending on the type of variable we are exporting. Let's see how it has done. The first thing we have to know is that we are exporting, in this case, the 10 digital output and the 10 digital input of an Adquio. So, since they are just values 1 and 0, they are Boolean values, and since they are Boolean values, we can save up to 8 in 1 byte, but since Modbus memory addresses are 2 bytes, we can save up to 16. Therefore, we are going to see with this point and bit address nomenclature as it has done. The first variable is at address 0 bit 0. The second variable is at address 0 bit 1. Let's see what goes like this until bit 2015, because they are 16 bits from 0 to 15, and since we have 10 digital inputs and 10 outputs digital, in total there are 20. Here we have 16, and the next block uses the following 4. The memory address 1.0, 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3. 4 addresses from 0 to 3, okay. So, as you can see, to export 20 Boolean variables, it has used a 16-bit and 4-bit memory location. From the next memory location, that is, it has used memory location 0, and memory location 1. Next, we already have 32-bit integers in address 2, in address 4, because we remember that the addresses will be 16 bits, therefore, an integer of 32 occupies 2 of them. So, this 32-bit integer will occupy positions 2 and 3, the next 4 and 5, the next 6 and 7. We are going to see some 64-bit ones. Here we see that this variable is 32 bits, and occupies addresses 28 and 29. On the other hand, this one, which is 64, occupies 32, 33, 34 and 35, because the next is 36. Similarly, 36, 37, 38 and 39, okay. So, we have seen that Adquio has automatically given the memory addresses, and has organized them in the most efficient way possible. If they are variables of type Boolean, it does not occupy an integer byte or an entire memory position for just a Boolean value, but instead, it places them taking advantage of the bits of that memory block of a position. The 16 bits available are each used for a Boolean variable. So, we have already selected all the variables to export, and we already have the correct memory addresses assigned. What should we do now? Well, normally, if we are configuring an Adquio to export these variables, our client will request that we pass on the list of addresses that Adquio provides us. To do this, we will click on this button, and we can export the list of addresses, and we can do it in 3 formats. In text format, in JSON format, and in CSV format. We are going to see each one of them. The first, the text format, we are already seeing it. This allows us to copy it from here. In this way, logically, it would have to be copied in its entirety. Copy and we take them to the word processor that we like the most, in this case, in text format. If we want it in JSON formats, we will export it this way, and we would do it exactly the same. We select the block, copy it and paste it, and finally, if we do it in this format, CSV, we would have to copy it, paste it into a document with a CSV extension, and then, we can import it into any spreadsheet, and it would be perfectly in column, okay. These are the 3 main options, with which we can export this information to pass it on to the person in charge, who is going to read our Adquio. We have another export format, that usually comes in handy for programmers from other brands of PLCs, since this corresponds to the syntax of their programming language. So, in this way, with this export, we make it easier for an automaton of another brand to read our registers, not having to type them one by one, but instead, they can paste it directly into their code editor, and have the configuration already available. Alright, finally, what we have to do is activate the device and save. Finally, we see that a red button is activated up here. What we have to do is press it to confirm these changes. We will give you to apply changes. Next, we see that in the state of the marks in execution, it is already available, and we would already be serving these variables through Modbus TCP on port 502, okay. We are going to see a last detail, which we also have available, and that is, if we want to make massive changes to the elements of this list, we have a specific option that is not given in almost any other list, that we can make this table completely editable. It takes a little bit, because it has many elements, and what it does is set all the fields of this table as editable. Let's see it in a few seconds. Here it is. In this way, we could make massive changes in a much more comfortable way than having to enter line by line in each of the elements by giving this option of the pencil, okay? As we enter, we also exit this way with the option to disable table editing. Very good, because with this, We have finished the class in which we explain how to export variables in Modbus from Adquio. See you next time.